Chapter 4. When he awoke, his eyes gradually opened, one eye and then the next. He glanced around, looking down at his hands. He was seated in a chair, with his hands and arms and legs held down with chains, which were brought together slyly with a lock. His eyes were covered with a scarf, and from the smell of it had been worn by Zoey. His eyesight blurred, but still he could make out some forms in the dark. The room was dimly lit, but through the scarf he could see a small shimmer of light, a small flashlight or open door. There was silence around him, but Thorn could hear breathing, and the pacing of footsteps above. The floor didn't have carpet. Thorn heard unclear voices above him in a room above his head. He heard strong footsteps like that of men standing and then moving around. Thorn thought he might be in a basement somewhere. But where? The dark room had the smell of dirt and old dying vegetables. It wasn't hot or cold in there, it was just damp with a moldy, chronic smell that made him nauseous. He felt like he could throw up, but it would be a dry heave, because his stomach was empty and he was thirsty. He had never been this thirsty before in his life. He could go without food for 12 days, but water? That was another issue. It wasn't clear how long he had been here, but it was enough time to know that he needed to eat again, and he needed water like yesterday. "Where am I?" Thorn said, his tongue heavy, his speech slurred, as if he had been drinking liquor for days. Then he heard the deep breathing of someone standing in the middle of the stairs leading down to the cellar. He could hear the hard footsteps of a man as he trudged down the stairs onto the cement floor. "Is that all you can ask? What about where is your wife?" The voice said playfully, but this was nothing to play about. He had been kidnapped, and for all Thorn knew, Zoey could be dead or worse. He didn't want to think about worse. The man crouched near Thorn's right ear. Thorn tried moving his arms, his fingers, anything, but his arms felt like two bricks, and his mouth felt dry, his lips cracked like a desert floor that once had a river passing through it but now no longer. Thorn could turn his head but nothing else, and that was a difficult task, because it was as if his head weighed more than his entire body. There wasn't anything he could do. He just sat there, unable to move to help himself, or look after Zoey. At that moment he felt powerless. He had never been drugged before, and he didn't recognize it for what it was. Thorn had only heard of those things because it had never happened in his world, but then his world comprised of a small area and a small town and a small pack of werewolves. There was a whole world out there where this was routine, where men used drugs to control other men. "I figured you would tell me about her." It was hard for Thorn to form his sentences. He had to take his time when talking. "Is Zoey why I'm here?" Thorn said, hiding his fear, not for himself but for Zoey. He had been warned by his father that dangers from men could haunt a werewolf all his life if he wasn't careful. He had been prepared for the worst for himself, but not for what could happen to Zoey. "You're here because of Zoey," the voice said, standing. It was a strange voice, like none he had heard before. A voice trying to hide the cruel and brutal person behind it. It was an unnatural deep voice, as if pretending strength, while hiding the cowardice of the person behind a sometimes cheerful, cruel, pleasant voice. "You have something I want," the voice said, his tone soft and easy. "And you would kidnap me to get my wife. That doesn't make any sense. Why not kidnap her and ask me for ransom?" Thorn discovered it was more than about money. This had to be a guest at the hotel who thought they had money, but if he was there, he didn't need the money, or did he? Because no one would give her a dime, and well, "I want her and the money," he said, as if he was talking about buying a new model of car. "If I had her, you wouldn't pay the money, but she said that your family would pay to get you returned. At first I was going to take her, and when I finished with her, then let her go, or maybe kill her," the voice said matter of fact. "But then when she said you had money, or your family had money, I changed my mind about you. My plans changed. She's a good fuck. I would get the money and get lost with her." He walked around Thorn, so Thorn raised his nose and took in his scent. He didn't want to forget that scent ever. "Where's Zoey?" "She's cooking for me and my friends." The voice laughed. "She's pretty handy in the kitchen. You had yourself a real domesticated one, and she's good to look at and good in bed. I envy you, but soon you will envy me." "That is?" The voice didn't finish his conversation. "Zoey's a survivor. She'd do what was necessary to survive," Thorn thought. "Did you? Is she?" Thorn choked and the words wouldn't come out. "No. Not yet. But all in good time. I need her to carry a message to your family." He walked in front of Thorn and bent over, took out a scalpel from his pocket, and with one quick slash cut Thorn's pinky finger off. The finger fell into a small box. Then Thorn heard a flick from a lighter. The man burnt the end of Thorn's finger to cauterize the wound. Thorn tightened his grip on the arm of the metal chair and gnashed his teeth. He wrapped his long fingers around the arms of the chair. He didn't scream. The shock would have caused him to shift, but he controlled that, because where could he go in chains? The heavy chains prevented movement of any kind, and the medication rendered his body useless. "You must be a badass. You can lose one of your fingers and never scream nor flinch. I wonder what you'll do when I..." The voice's tone took on another element, and his true nature showed through to Thorn. Thorn realized that he and Zoey wouldn't leave the house alive if the man got his hands on the money. Standing before him was indeed a crazy man. Thorn had to figure something out before it was too late for him, and if he died, then Zoey would be at the mercy of this maniac. He didn't know how much time he had, because he didn't know how long he had been in this cellar. All he could do was to sit there and use these precious moments to think. The drugs had his mind confused. No one knew where they were, and by now Zoey was so afraid that she couldn't think straight, and all she could do was to stay alive by pleasing the voice. Where is Tracker? Thorn wondered. Didn't he know when they didn't make it to Mexico that something had to be wrong? Thorn's mind focused on the danger in front of him and smiled. His father had said to meet danger with a smile and not a frown. Men were dangerous. You couldn't allow the enemy to know you were fearful, unless it was used to disarm them. What are you smiling about? The voice asked. He had been thrown off by the smile and had become unsure of himself. You can't do anything to me. I wish you could see yourself. No. I'll let your wife see what a pathetic man she has married. It's not what I will do to you now, it's what I will do to you later, Thorn said with a raised eyebrow and a wider smile showing his large incisors. In the dim light, the voice only saw the smile. He didn't see Thorn's deadly teeth. You're confident for a man in chains who can't see and doesn't know where he is. I'm confident, not because I'm a man, but because I'm much more than a man. I'm a werewolf, Thorn said with his voice and thoughts coming freely back to him. The voice in Thorn's darkness began laughing, and the laughter continued. He said, a werewolf. I've heard everything now. A fucking werewolf. And the voice laughed louder, until the sound of shoes hit the wooden stairs, and stopped only when Thorn heard the creaking sound of an old door opening and closing, and the disappearance of light. Thorn suddenly heard Zoey scream in the darkness. Thorn grabbed the arms of the frame of the metal chair, but he couldn't do anything, because before the voice in the darkness had left, he shot him up with something that made him weak and limp, and Thorn passed out once more. Stephen Romero had gone to the best schools in California, and had flunked out of all of them. You have been a fuck-up from the day you were born, his father had said. Stephen wanted to be a doctor, and tried to convince his family that he deserved the money they had heaped on him, and finally, when his father discovered he hadn't completed but a few semesters, and even less credits after going to school for 6 years, he decided finally to cut the money off. In high school, he had been a fuck-up. He had a promising career as an athlete, and his father thought he could go on to the Olympics and win a medal or two after graduating from school, but he ran over a man while he was drunk, and instead of telling someone, he drove away from the scene and hid the body. It took a lot of money to clean that up. After the hit-and-run incident, his father thought he had learned his lesson, but he was a fuck-up there too with college and all. It had been his father's dream that Stephen would return home to become a small-town doctor in Flagstaff, a city of 70,000 people. But after living in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and tasting the good life of women and men, he didn't want to do anything but pretend to be a doctor. He stole doctors' prescription pads and wrote his own prescriptions for drugs and sold them to his friends. He was too smart to take them, he told himself. When his fellow athletes and one-time classmates called him down to San Diego to find out what he had been up to lately, he threw his clothes in his leased BMW and drove down from Flagstaff in it to give them the impression that he was doing well. He checked into an expensive suite above Thorn and Zoey. He charged everything to his father, because by that time he had thoughts of killing his father and mother, and he would have all the money he would ever need. His week-long stay at the hotel was filled with drinking tequila shots and watching Zoey swimming. He wasn't interested in the girls that his friends brought to the hotel room, so he came up with the notion that he could have her for himself. After concocting a scheme and feeding it to his drunken friends, he got them involved in the abduction of Thorn and Zoey. He said that Zoey was his girlfriend, and that she had left him for some dude. He didn't know the guy, and the fella didn't know him, but he would teach them both a lesson not to fuck with him. In a drunken stupor, his rich friends helped Stephen carry Thorn and Zoey to his car, and load Thorn into the trunk. When his friends woke the next day, they had forgotten about the incident, or they tried to pretend it never happened, but nonetheless, Stephen had checked out, and they were free of him and the thought of what they had done. When Zoey woke in her suite and saw 4 men standing in front of her, her first thoughts were she was back with Beau, but when her vision adjusted, she knew this was not Beau nor his friends and Thorn wasn't there. Fearing for her life, she jumped out of bed, sprang to her feet, and rushed to the hotel restroom. "Come out of there. If you don't, I'm coming in there and get you, and you know what will happen when I do." She didn't say a word, but tried locking the door. She had success. She leaned on it, taking a large breath of relief, but what she didn't realize, because she was too afraid, was that the door in front of her led to the restroom too. She sat down in a ball with her hands cupping her knees, and her head down, rocking back and forth with fear. Her back lay against the door behind her, and she sat facing the opposite door. Realizing she hadn't locked that door, she stood and rushed for the door, but it was too late. Stephen stood taunting her and laughing, knowing that the door was open, and he and his friends could get to her any time. He heard her breathing hard. He heard her hands shake and he heard her scream. Then when he burst through the door, she saw him standing there with his pants unzipped.